Hi, friends. My name's Trish Roberts. I wonder if if you have any audio issues, if you're not able to hear, please let me know. I don't have anybody who's able to check for me at the moment. So I just wanted to first say how lovely it is to have been invited to Real Progressives and by Steve Grumbine, and how welcoming people have been, and how nice it is to have somebody like, say, Joe Firestone. I was just watching his live stream just before, and I didn't realize that I stepped away for a moment. He was asking, could I put my vegan resource, How to Go Vegan, up so that people could see it. Thanks, Nancy. And so how very supportive he is, and how welcoming people are on this page. I haven't really, hi Mark, I haven't really had such a welcome before from a group, and makes me feel a little teary even. So, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to talk about this issue, because, it's hard to get sometimes the forum to do so. For example, actually, Jay, it's not too difficult to find. Sorry, Jay just wrote a little note saying he's trying to go vegan, but he's finding it hard to find dairy alternatives. It's not too difficult to find dairy alternatives. Oh, that's great, Nancy. Nancy says she's just celebrated her 4th year of being vegan. That's excellent. Jay, it's there's actually quite a lot of dairy alternatives. There's lots of different nut milks and the like, and it's kind of there's more and more dairy alternatives. And if you can find an organic soy, that's good too. But so and something that might motivate you too, Jay, when you're thinking, oh God, this is, I'd like to have a piece of cheese or something today, and that passes, by the way, when you become vegan. That those sort of initial they're almost like little addictions in a way. They actually pass fairly quickly, and particularly when you think about, the violence that's inherent in dairy. And I'll leave a link to, even the so-called humane dairy is a nightmare. So it's something that we I wish I could. I love seeing the comments, but they're actually popping up onto the screen, and I'm trying to. If anybody knows how I can stop that, that'd be great, because it's a bit distracting. But anyway, so hi, Alison. Yes, soy actually is not too bad. Laura says soy is not so good. Soy actually, if you go to nutritionfacts.org. It's a science-backed site about the benefits of a plant-based diet. It's actually science-backed, and it's really amazing. Like, it's not, it's not faux science and stuff. It's really, they scan all the health journals, the nutrition journals, the medical journals, and then they present the findings, and you'll be amazed at that how incredible a plant-based diet is for your health, and a balanced plant-based diet, and how problematic animal products are, just putting aside the ethical reasons why eating animal products is very problematic. So but anyway, I wanted to, if I may, share this essay by Angel Flynn. Oh, and by the way, if anybody has any sort of questions about veganism at all, please, leave them in the comment section, and I'll do my best to address them. And before I go and read this essay by before I read this essay by Angel Flynn called The Importance of Being Vegan, it's not a long essay, and I think she says it better than I could. I wanted to just sort of bring to your attention something was written by Glenn Greenwald called The FBI's Hunt for Two Missing Piglets Reveals the Federal Cover-Up of Barbaric Factory Farms. And I'm going to do a live stream about that essay. Because it's got some good points in it, but also, and I'm very happy that Glenn Greenwald is writing about this. He tends to focus a bit on the barbaricness of factory farms, but at the end he talks about the sentience of animals. Now, what's the problem with talking about the barbaricness of factory farms? Well, the issue is. The issue is not treatment in relation to animals, because it doesn't matter how you treat them, there's always going to be violence and torture in relation to animal use. Animal welfare, as I've mentioned in other live streams, is problematic because what animal welfare reform is, it's really about making the industry more economically efficient. So it's not about the animals at all. And even if it was the most wonderful circumstances for animals, even if they, they were given their own beds and they were sung to sleep every night and they played Mozart in the place, it makes no difference because, when you're exploiting a sentient being, for example, if you're exploiting children, nobody would say, well, let's find humane ways of exploiting children. Let's give them, instead of a 16-hour day, let's give them, a softer bed, a little bit softer pillow to sleep on. And let's give them one extra helping of potatoes or something. We wouldn't suggest these things when it comes to children. And non-human animals are sentient, just like children are. They're sentient, just like we are. And and when Glenn Greenwald, in his latest essay from The Intercept, when he talks about these, he basically talks about factory farming in relation to the FBI going into these factory farms going into sanctuaries now and harassing sanctuary employees over these two piglets that were removed from a factory farm and they were dying. And I'll get to this whole idea of rescuing and stuff in a minute. And the FBI has been harassing animal sanctuaries now. If you're probably aware that animal advocates have been put, that go into animal farms are considered terrorists by the FBI. And, it's under an act called the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. So the FBI is looking for the people who, I think, removed those two piglets that were dying amongst hundreds that were dying and suffering greatly in factory farms, because that's the nature of not only factory farms, but animal use in general. So, but the problem with, and I want to just briefly talk about what's the problem with focusing on treatment and these factory farms is that there will never be an end to factory farming, because while people are not vegan, there's going to be more and more demand. There's 1 million people born every 4 days on the planet. And so the planet's population is increasing. And you'll probably notice that, not only is that factory farming, you'll notice that is becoming more widespread today. It's actually increasing in China, even though China apparently the government's made some sort of decree that they want to decrease the consumption of meat. by 50% or something. They recognize how devastating it is for the environment. I wish that they realized how devastating it is for sentient beings, but it's, I guess that's something. But I mean, that's why promoting veganism as an ethical position about animals, and that's the reason to stop eating and wearing and using them. But you know, factory farming is spreading. It's actually tremendous. You know, it's growing every single day. And that's because it's economically efficient to have lots and lots of animals in very, very confined spaces, feed them lots and lots of antibiotics, and it doesn't, and they write off the idea of animals dying by the hundreds. They look at the balance of the figures, and then it doesn't matter to them if a lot of animals die. It matters to some degree, but the idea is to get mass amount of animals in these sort of confined spaces because there's great demand for animal products. And they lie about, you know, that there's been a response to this essay by Glenn Greenwald, you know, the Smithfields Farms, which is the biggest producer in the world, I think, of pigs, pig flesh. They've been writing to Glenn Greenwald and probably saying, oh, you know, that was some sort of a scam. This evidence that was found on this film, it's not, you know, in the torture, the pigs dying, etc. This is not how it normally is. Yes, that's how it normally is in industrialized farming, and I'm not just talking about these factory farms that all these large animal organizations focus on. They don't talk about veganism. They just talk about treatment. They don't talk about the end of use. They talk about the treatment of animals. There are terrible so-called free-range farms, you know, that really are just big industrialized farms where the animals are able to have a little bit of movement, and that's what they consider free range. And there's just as much disease and death and suffering in those farms. So, you know, this whole idea of there's happy animal exploitation, happy in quotes, and there's factory farms that are awful. You know, there's the good way of exploiting animals, and then there's the terrible way of exploiting them. The factory farms are the terrible way, and then the good way is all these humane labels, you know, the 5-step humane label that the Humane Society of the United States likes to promote, and all these different, you know, the different sorts of ways to continue to consume animals, you know, the flexitarianism, the meat-free Mondays, all that sort of stuff, all these very morally questionable positions that are put out by all these large animal organizations. And Direct Action Everywhere that Glenn Greenwald mentions in The Intercept, they're actually anti-vegan. They actually have written anti-vegan essays. The director, Wayne Shung, has written weird essays about why he tries to do his best to put down veganism when it's convenient, and then when he's talking to somebody else, he's not doing that. So this is what happens when you have organizations that rely on donations. They end up with these morally confused messages. That's what happens. So I don't pay any attention to them. And when I see large, you know, when I see groups like Direct Action Everywhere going into factory farms, I think that's totally not necessary anymore, because there is ample evidence all over the web, all over YouTube. There's ample evidence that animal use is that, you know, these factory farms are horrific. There's people on talk shows talking about how horrific it is. There's slaughterhouse videos everywhere. We don't need any more evidence that factory farming or other forms of farming is horrific. It's all over the net, and it's in books and everything. So the only reason a lot of these large well, they're not such a large group, but the only reason these groups, animal groups that call themselves animal rights groups, which they're not, if they don't have veganism as their moral baseline, they're not an animal rights group. The only reason they really use these, these awful videos that we don't need to see, because, you know, we know already that factory farming is horrific, and just, you know, we know that, so we don't need to see it. And the only reason they use that now is to ask for donations. So, you know, that's not, and they don't really, you don't see at the end of any of these videos, go vegan. You know, they don't ask people to go vegan. They just sort of ask for your money. And that's unfortunately because these, and because, you know, capitalism and animal, you know, these large animal organizations being businesses, that's what they need. They bring in millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, some of them. And, you know, they have really great salaries, and they never promote veganism. They're always asking for money, but they never ask people to go vegan. And PETA, most of their PEA people for the ethical treatment of animals, they have 2 million members, and most of those members are not vegan. Well, you know, that's the first thing. If somebody recognizes that animal use is horrific and wrong, then the first thing, you know, one should be is vegan. You know, that's like the first thing. That when I first became vegan, and we had this brief dalliance of trying to appeal to government, and also we had a look at these different large animal organizations, we were kind of shocked to see that most people in those organizations were not vegan. Not only that, they never asked in all of their single issue campaigns, which are problematic because they promote the idea that one form of animal use is worse than another, or that one species is more important than another. But in none of their single issue campaigns, they ever asked anybody to go vegan. They'd sort of ask for these, you know, they'd conflate vegetarianism with veganism. They'd, you know, sort of focus on one species as if they're more important morally than other species. You know, it was so confused. And they'd also sort of say, oh, cut back, cut down, you know, cut out dairy, or stop, you know, cut out meat, and completely confused. I mean, if you were a human rights group, you wouldn't say to people, you know, you wouldn't suggest, you would say to people, this sort of exploitation of humans is wrong, and it's wrong because they're sentient. You know, they're sentient. They're humans. You know, so we must reject all of that exploitation of humans. You know, and if we were talking about children, we would reject child slavery completely. We wouldn't say, well, this form of child slavery is not as bad as that form of child slavery, so that child slavery is okay. This one, not so much. So we must boycott that group because that child slavery is more problematic. And then when they improve that child slavery, then you can all go back to buying you know, products from those children, you know, that have made those things. You know, we don't do that when we're talking about humans. We don't make these moral hopefully we're not morally inconsistent, you know, when we talk about human exploitation and what needs to happen. But sadly, those that call themselves animal rights advocates are doing all kinds of out there sort of things, asking people to cut back on certain forms of certain animal products or buy happy animal products, you know, and the compassionately raised animals, you know, and all this sort of nonsense. It's so confused, and you rarely ever see them mention veganism. And if they do, it's kind of optional, or it's conflated with vegetarianism. It's made out to be a diet, because veganism is an ethical position, just like any other ethical position. There's no difference between, you know, if you reject one form of discrimination, like speciesism, we must reject all of them because they're all forms of the same, they're all faces of the same ignorance. They're all excluding a certain group based on an irrelevant criterion. For example, race, you know, we, you know, discriminate against a certain group of humans because they're a certain race. So we discriminate against, you know, animals because they happen to be a different species. These are sort of very, very poor reasons to discriminate and and exploit groups because of these irrelevant criterion. So, that's why I never ever promote any large animal groups, including I never promote direct action everywhere either. Any of these groups are problematic because they're all more interested in many ways about donations and about their brand than they are about about actually ending animal use. And that's what I'm all about. That's what veganism is all about. If you've ever, the veganism sort of was coined, the word vegan was coined by Donald Watson in 1944. And he coined that term because he recognized that vegetarianism didn't go far enough, that there was a tremendous violence in dairy and eggs. And he never, ever promoted happy animal slavery, happy animal exploitation, happy animal products. He never promoted that. He just said, we need to reject the use of the exploitation of animals for, meat, dairy, eggs, etc., for entertainment, for, well, actually, he wasn't that explicit, but he actually he was definite about the fact that it was a harm, it was violence, and we don't need to do it because we can be completely healthy. Eating a plant-based diet, and we don't need to use wool and leather, etc. We don't need to use those things, and they're also products of violence. And I'm going to do a live stream just about wool one day because most people think that it's completely harmless, but all the animals that are used for wool end up being killed for meat. And there's also practices within that industry that are very violent. And of course, the simple fact is, as a vegan, it doesn't matter, whether they're, as I said, whether they're treated in this most wonderful way, and at the time of their death, they're sung to sleep and sung to, they're sung to, and they're stroked, and then somebody cuts their throat. It doesn't matter. It's really about use. It's about the paradigm shift, the change of people's consciousness to realize that this is not about finding lovely ways and better ways of exploiting the vulnerable, of exploiting sentient animals. Veganism is not about finding ways to do the wrong thing, better ways to do the wrong thing. It really isn't. And it's not about how the animals are treated. That's not the issue, because it's all problematic and there's always violence in it, and they're sentient. So all of it is wrong, no matter how lovely we think those animals were brought up. In the end, they all wind up in the same slaughterhouse anyway. So what I'm trying to say to you is that veganism is not about humane animal exploitation. It's not about finding humane animal products, or it's not about cutting back. It's not about vegetarianism. It's not about excluding some animal products and then hanging on to others. It's not an optional thing. It's not a diet. It's an ethical position. And once there's so much misinformation about veganism out there, especially from large animal groups and groups like Direct Action Everywhere, from this Intercept article by Glenn Greenwald, which he doesn't focus on much here, but I just mentioning them because I don't want, when I eventually do this live stream or even just a video about just going through Glenn Greenwald's essay, which, I think is quite helpful in many ways, even though he's not explicit about veganism, but it's helpful in some ways. He's not telling people to start doing happy animal products or anything. But I just wanted to mention the large animal groups because they've been part of the problem of why many in society now think that the answer to animal exploitation, the answer to soothing our conscience, is to start, purchasing happy animal products and eating happy animal products, humane animal products, so-called humane animal products. They think that's the answer because large animal groups and also groups that like Direct Action Everywhere, that focus on treatment of animals rather than ending the use of animals. That's the problem. The problem is not treatment of animals. The problem is our use of animals, period. So it's not how we use animals, it's that we use animals at all that is the issue. So that's why I keep talking about, I don't talk about the awfulness of factory farming. Sometimes I mention some of the awfulness. I'll I often, not often, but occasionally I'll read something about organic dairy, because there's tremendous awfulness in that. And I will leave a link to that. So I don't focus on treatment because I don't want people to think that the way we treat animals, that they just need to be treated better, or we need to get rid of factory farms. That's never going to happen. Factory farms, until most of society is vegan, factory farms will not only be here, but they will increase in number, and they will become more and more horrific as time goes by. So, it's the simple economic fact of no demand equals no supply. If we're not creating demand for animal products, there will be no need for anybody to be supplying them. There will be no need for factory farming. There will be no need for mom and pop farms, because they're problematic too. They take the children away from the mothers, dairy cows, and the cows are crying and the children are crying. They remove male calves and take them away to be slaughtered and stuff. There's problems with all forms of animal use, whether it's factory farming or mom and pop farms or whatever, or the free range, so-called free range, which is just a scam to sell animal products. If you really look into it, it's all a scam. And, the whole free range thing is a scam. So let's sort of try and, if we can internalize this issue, meaning if we can internalize the fact that that treatment is not the issue, we need to have a completely different discourse around the issue of animal use, animals and our use of them. We need to stop thinking about it in terms of treatment of animals, and think in terms of ending the use of animals. And ending the use will solve all the treatment issues. We won't have to be worried about treatment at all, because there will be no use. And the thing is that a lot of these farms, a lot of these farms only introduce animal welfare reform into anything when they think it's going to be economically efficient to do so. For example, when they introduced animal welfare standards, I can't remember when they did that in slaughterhouses. They only did that to reduce worker injuries and to stop the flesh of animals being damaged while they were thrashing about, and etc. So it was all about, and it always is about, economic efficiency. It's never ever about the animals. So when anybody ever says to you, these animal welfare standards, it's important that we improve the animal welfare, that's a complete nonsense. Excuse me for a second. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody was at the door. I'm sorry about that. What I was saying was that somebody was at the door. I'm sorry, I had to race and let them in. So can you hear me now? So anyway, oh, good. Got it now? So sorry, I had to race off. Somebody was at the door. So anyway, that's what we need to think about, is that it's not about treatment. It's not about how animals are used. It's that animals are used that is the issue, that they're used at all. So that's what I wanted to say. Okay, so now I'm going to I just want to say a couple more things. Thanks for letting me know, Marsha and Jan and Joy and Mark, and I appreciate you joining in this. I was going to wait and have a more sort of I was going to have a more sort of specific thing about this essay by Glenn Greenwald, because I was pleased to see that he he's decided to because and I'm on his Facebook page, and I actually sort of tend to, when he talks about his love of dogs, I've always kind of said to Glenn, that's fantastic, that you love dogs, and you should think about going vegan, because the other animals, the animals on our plates and, the ones that we use for clothing, etc., they're all they all have the same sentience as the dogs that he loves. He loves dogs. He's got 5 dogs or something with his partner, David. And so every so often I would kind of say that, and kind of on his page, and hope that he sort of maybe caught it, like, I know he's very busy. And I mentioned to a friend, Eunice Wong, if she saw that essay, and she was happy to see that he seems to be thinking about going vegan, and that's a really good thing. That's what needs to happen. All of us who are for justice and nonviolence need to think about this issue and contemplate it, what we're doing. I mean, it's the 21st century. It's 2017. And we don't need animal products at all to survive. We can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we're using these animals now, the only reason we're torturing them and killing them is because we think they taste good. And honestly, a plant-based diet is fantastic. There is so many options now, and so many things one can make. Oh, okay, Mark. I'm sorry. I know I've done this very late, this live stream, and I'm sorry that it's so late. Sometime I was waiting for Joe to finish, and I thought I would just slip in a live stream here to just talk briefly about Glenn's essay, and also just to talk generally about veganism. Anyway, so what I was saying about Glenn is that Glenn Greenwald is that you could see that the penny was starting to drop with him, and what he's participating in. He was starting to really get that the movement towards thinking about veganism, and that's a really good thing. And so I'm hoping that he'll think more about it, and that will be great. I just want to briefly read to you. I just want to sort of read this essay it's called "The Importance of Becoming Vegan," the importance of being vegan, and I hope that you enjoy it. It's only about 5 or 6 paragraphs, but it's written by Angel Flynn from Gentle World, which is a vegan intentional community. And I'll leave a link to that essay, but I think you might find it enjoyable, and it really expresses this very well. So, quote, "If a man earnestly seeks a righteous life, his first act of abstinence is from animal food. That's from Leo Tolstoy. Intellectually, most of us agree that inflicting unnecessary harm is unjustified, whether the victims are human or not. Yet somehow most of the same people who subscribe to this belief are willing to turn a blind eye to such harm when they themselves receive some kind Yet somehow most of the same people who subscribe to this belief are willing to turn a blind eye to such harm when they themselves receive some kind of advantage from it, whether the benefits are in the form of food, possessions, vanity, or amusement. Sadly, because widespread violence against animals in the form of agriculture, research, and even entertainment is sanctioned by mainstream society and its legal systems, the majority of people tend to be unwilling to see this brutality for what it is and to step outside of the pervasive conditioning that makes such atrocities possible. It's true that more and more people are beginning to speak out about the many abhorrent abuses that occur within the animal industry, and the movement to, quote, improve conditions, end quote, for these animals continues to gain popularity. And yet each of the awful practices that animal advocates protest passionately against, intensive confinement, enforced insemination, separation of mother and child, castration, dehorning, tail docking, debeaking, mulesing, detowing, live scalding, force molting, all of these horrific procedures and many more exist because an ever-growing number of human consumers continue to create demand for animal products. To an animal industry that views sentient beings as economic units, money-making machines, it is unavoidable that such violence will be viewed as an acceptable means to the end of delivering products that turn a profit. In any case, even if every one of the aforementioned practices were abolished, it would still be immoral and inexcusable to use other sentient beings as resources. In today's world, vegan alternatives are available for every single significant purpose for which we currently use animals. Increasing number of people are embracing veganism as a solution to problems we experience as individuals and as a society, from our many health crises to environmental emergency to the issue of escalating violence, all of which have us living in some degree of fear for the future. As this movement for animal emancipation grows in size and strength, a powerful example is being set by the individuals who refuse to take any part in the brutal oppression of innocence that we call, quote, the animal industry, end quote. Men and women all over the globe, simply by living as vegans, are demonstrating that there is no moral justification for the harm we inflict on animals. And it has here notabene, although animal products are used in certain items for which there are currently no consumer alternatives, such as computers and car tires, there are alternatives that could be easily be used in their manufacturing. Some people might attempt to justify consumption of animal products for reasons of health, and yet an increasing number of medical professionals are beginning to realize that not only are plant-based diets nutritionally complete, but they are actually more nourishing and far less toxic than their animal-based counterparts. In addition, the public is beginning to realize that many of the major dangers associated with diet, heart disease, cancer, stroke, obesity, diabetes, and many, many more, are exacerbated by the consumption of animal products and can actually be avoided by adopting a vegan diet. According to the world's largest organization of food and nutrition professionals, the American Dietetic Association, the ADA, quote, appropriately planned vegetarian diets, including total vegetarian or vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. Well-planned vegetarian diets are appropriate for individuals during all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, and adolescence, and for athletes, end quote. So that was the quote from the ADA. In other words, the official position of the very mainstream ADA is that including animal products in one's diet is not only unnecessary, but can actually be harmful to our health. What about our other uses of animals? Leather, wool, silk, down, fur, toiletries, cosmetics, entertainment, sport, the vast majority of our experimentation. All of these are also clearly unnecessary under any coherent concept of the word, quote, necessary, end quote, as there are vegan alternatives available for them all. Veganism is not a fringe philosophy. Excuse me. It is a moral baseline that is consistent with beliefs that most of us already hold. Veganism is a simple matter of refraining from the participating in unnecessary and harmful use of sentient beings. As most people are naturally opposed to unnecessary violence, becoming and staying vegan is not a matter of changing any of our basic moral beliefs. It simply requires us to be willing to change the habits we have developed that prevent us from living according to our principles. Every one of us has been conditioned by the propaganda of a highly speciesist society, a worldwide culture that is extremely prejudiced against the interest of those animals who did not have the good fortune to be born onto this planet in human form. And yet every one of us has the power to break free from this indoctrination. Becoming vegan is simply recognizing and admitting who we really are. It is the opportunity to become who we would be if no one had ever taught us that it's okay to turn our backs on the needs and rights of our fellow animals, that it's okay to ignore their pain if it leads to our pleasure. Is veganism a sacrifice? Not at all. On the contrary, it is every non-vegan choice that sacrifices our own. On the contrary, it is every non-vegan choice that sacrifices our own inherent goodness. Once you make the decision to live consistently with your values, the rewards in the form of a healthier body, clearer mind, and more peaceful conscience will be both profoundly apparent and a source of continuing joy. But even if veganism does require us to give up some of our favorite foods, beloved items of clothing, and cherished habits, does that question really matter? The institution of slavery and the treatment of sentient beings as things, whether human or non-human, are inherently and gravely unjust. The changes that veganism requires of us and the rewards that veganism brings are relevant to the true moral question. Is the taste of a particular food or the way you feel in your favorite pair of shoes or your winter coat more important than the life and freedom of another living, feeling being? So that's the essay that Angel Flynn and Dan Kadehi wrote on gentleworld.org, and it is the first article in a 10-part series titled Freedom's New Frontier, A Guide to Animal Rights. And I'll put a link to that essay in the information section. So anyway, this is really all I wanted to say today. I realize, sorry, it's been a little bit disjointed, and I hope that I hope that you found it interesting. And so I'll wrap it up here, and I look forward to your company next time. I hope that you'll check out my comprehensive vegan resource, howtogovegan.org, and it has lots and lots of, it's a podcast, so you can listen to it at your leisure on a treadmill or walking or whatever. And I think you'll find that it will help internalize the ethical position, which is what keeps us vegan and is the greatest motivator, really. All these other things of health, etc., even though they might motivate some people to think about it, when it becomes inconvenient, oftentimes people will ditch. You're welcome, Marsha. Will ditch becoming vegan. Will ditch veganism because they haven't really internalized the ethical position. You know, when it becomes a little bit inconvenient, And that's why I always focus on the ethical position, just like I wouldn't focus on, depleted uranium and how awful it is for the environment in relation to war. I talk about, when I talk about war, I talk about the consequence of the killing of innocent human beings for resources and hegemony. I don't talk about how awful depleted uranium is being in Iraq, being used by the US, and how damaging it is to the environment, even though, of course, that's an important thing, and also that it affects the children there and they get terrible deformities and stuff. But I mean, the issue of war is immoral, and the same with animal use. Animal use is unethical and immoral, and that's why I always talk about it in ethical terms, and not focusing on health or environment, even though they're ancillary benefits of veganism, and also there's ethical reasons to stop destroying the environment as well, for not only non-humans but humans. But so that's what veganism is, an ethical position. And if you remember anything about this live stream today, just remember that it's not about treatment of animals. It's not about how awful we treat them. It's that we treat them, that we use them, that we exploit them at all. That's the issue. That's what's wrong, that we use animals at all, sentient animals, in this way. Any use of them and exploitation of them is wrong, and killing them is wrong. So that's what veganism is. Okay, well, thanks so much for watching, and till next time. My name's Trish Roberts. This is Faint Signals for a Vega. Bye for now.